My mother-in-law was the reason we divorced. She thought she'd gotten her baby boy back, but I am not the easy kind. I don't surrender. She picked the wrong girl. The first time I caught Evelyn with her ear pressed to our bedroom door, she said she was checking for drafts. The second time, she had a glass in her hand for the baseboards, she claimed. Mark laughed it off because that's what he did with his mother. He laughed gently, patted her hand, and rewrote reality so it wouldn't trouble her. Over the months, reality bent so often it lived like a pretzel. Phone calls I never made appeared on his statement because you must have pocket dialed. Her spare key existed because she worries about us. The tracking app on our phones was, so I can find you if there's an emergency. Honey, my car once wouldn't start. I told Mark I wanted a therapist who wasn't her friend from church. We saw her friend from church. I told Mark I wanted boundaries. Evelyn hosted dinner in our apartment, used our kitchen like a stage, wiped the counters with the sleeves of her cardigan, and said she was teaching me how to keep house the way he grew up. By the time he left, he packed like a man leaving a hotel room. Everything folded, nothing mourned. He didn't shout. He said things softly that hurt worse than any slammed door. He said I had made his mother feel unwelcome. He said he couldn't live in a home where love felt like a negotiation. He carried the suitcases down to her car while she stood there, wearing pearls, watching me with the flat interest of a museum docent. Families stick together, she told me on his way out, as if I were misunderstanding an exhibit label. I'm sorry you never had that model growing up. I wish I could say I cried, because crying is clean. Instead, I went still, the way people get still just before a storm hits, airtight, ears full, chest aching, because everything outside is about to be rearranged. If you listen long enough at that pressure, you can hear something new, a ledger, clicking, totting, counting up everything taken. It's a crisp sound. I heard it and I thought, I'm going to make noise she can't laugh away. I didn't think of revenge, not at first. I thought of documentation. Evelyn loved narrative control. I would love paper. I spent a week walking the neighborhood at twilight, the time she liked to parade Mark around for the benefit of dog-walking witnesses. I learned her schedule. Mondays, volunteer shifts at Second Chance's boutique, the thrift store attached to their church. Tuesdays, HOA meetings she ran like Parliament. Wednesdays, book club at the treasurer's house. Thursdays, coffee at the salon. Fridays, helping Mark meal plan by buying groceries he never ate. Sundays were the performance. She sat in the second pew in a posture that said she was the one God confided in. I began with public records because public records don't fight back. I paid $36 to the county clerk for lien searches on Evelyn's address and on the thrift store. There were two, a contractor's lien for kitchen remodel, unpaid, and a smaller one tied to unreported inventory shrinkage, connected to Second Chances. The words were dry. I printed them on thick paper and placed them in a blue folder, the first pages of a book I didn't know I was writing. Next, I asked questions where she believed herself safest. I booked a trim at the salon where she drank coffee. I learned the hairdresser's name was Mia and that she bore the tiny, permanent flinch of someone who has had one client too powerful for too long. I tipped obscenely. I listened. Evelyn had, it seemed, a tab because she brought in so much business with her referrals. The tab had gotten strange, though large orders of box dye that never got picked up, a hairdryer for the church raffle that Mia had paid for and never been reimbursed. I asked for receipts for my own hair, all itemized, as if I were a person who loved keeping track. People mirror neatness. Mia printed copies for me as if we were already in the habit. It's funny how quickly a community opens once it senses a crack in the statue. At the HOA meeting, I showed up as a resident. The lease had my name too. I sat in the second row and watched Evelyn preside over a lawn height dispute like it were a border conflict. When the treasurer's report came, I raised my hand and asked, sweetly, why administrative expenses had doubled year over year. It was not an accusation, it was curiosity. Evelyn thanked me for my engagement, asked if I were new to the neighborhood, and said administrative expenses reflected inevitable costs of growth. I nodded, took the packet home, and marked the line items with sticky notes. At 2 a.m., I cross-referenced a photocopy of a check made to Hargreaves Consulting, her maiden name, against a business registry that listed the address as her house. Administrative expenses indeed. I needed voices besides my own. So I went visiting ghosts. The contractor's lien led me to Juan, who had built her kitchen island and been paid for half of it. He answered the door with his baby on his hip. He spoke careful English and easier Spanish. I matched his careful English with respect. He showed me the text messages where she praised the work and promised the rest once the grant money came in for our charity renovation. He didn't want to sue. His cousin worked at the church thrift store and needed the job. People like her know everyone, he said. She can make calls. I asked if I could take photos of the messages, no names, just numbers. He nodded, as if giving me something from the back of a drawer that he didn't need but couldn't throw away. At second chances, I bought a blouse and asked for a receipt. The girl at the register was 17, shy, and wearing the name tag backward. When she rang me up, she looked at the price, frowned, and changed it by hand. Is there a sale? I asked. She blinked the way people do when they're not sure if they're allowed to say. Miss Evelyn has a list, she whispered. Certain tags get different prices. Like, for regulars. I leaned in as if we were talking lip gloss. Regulars like. She shrugged. People she knows. People from committee. I tipped the donation jar and told her she was doing great. I left with 2 receipts, one original, one reprinted when I accidentally dropped coffee on the first. The numbers didn't match. I learned Evelyn's hobby was taking. It was delicate theft, elegant theft, theft that parked in gray area and took its shoes off and made tea. She took discounts from the store she oversaw and called it good stewardship. She took contractors' labor and called it delayed funds. She took HOA money as consulting fees and called it professionalization. She took my husband's time, his trust, his narratives about me, and called it motherhood. When Mark texted after 3 weeks of silence, "We need to talk," I showed up to the cafe wearing the blouse I'd bought at Second Chances. He noticed. He always noticed details, his gifts weaponized against himself. "You look good," he said, and then we sat in the warm smell of cinnamon and thyme that had dissolved like sugar in coffee. He said he missed me. He said he was trying to figure out where we'd gone wrong. I told him I had a folder. He laughed because that sounded like me. I had always had folders. He didn't laugh when I slid it across the table and he saw his mother's maiden name next to the HA's bank account. He didn't laugh when I showed him the boutique receipt discrepancies, the text promises to Juan, the page of goods donated by the salon that had turned up on resale sites with their church event tags still visible in the photos. This is not what you think, he said, and he was so loyal that for a second I wanted to be wrong so his loyalty could remain beautiful. Mom does a lot. Maybe there are mistakes. I think mistakes have patterns, I said. Look at the pattern. He pushed the folder away and pressed his palms to his eyes like he could physically rub my version of reality out. Even if some of this is true, he said finally, what are you doing? Keeping files? Following her? This is obsessive. If I learned anything from your mother, I said, it's to be organized. He stared at me like he didn't know what part of me he'd set loose. I'm not coming back, he said, but his voice wobbled in the middle like a bridge with a weight on it. I didn't ask you to, I said, and left the folder. I came to talk to the only person who might convince her to stop before other people see. Evelyn did not stop. She sent me a friendly letter through a lawyer, cease and desist, defamation, but it was sloppily drafted, and the address header listed E. Hargreaves Consulting under her name. I put the letter on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Then I began my little calendar. I had learned in our marriage that Evelyn thrived on the slow suffocation of doubt, the unanswered text, the offhand comment, the "oh, I thought you knew." She built pressure until people begged her to release it. So I did what she did. I started with air. An anonymous email to the church board with screenshots of the thrift store receipts. No editorializing, just, are you aware? A copy of the contractor lien slid under the HOA treasurer's door with 2 names highlighted. A sealed envelope to Mia at the salon with a thank you note for supporting community raffles and a question about tax deductibility. A drop to a local reporter I followed online, attaching public documents and the boutique state filings with mismatched numbers circled. People think exposure is one dramatic reveal. It's actually 1,000 paper cuts. The first week after my emails, nothing happened. The second week, the boutique's sale signs came down. The third, the church bulletins carried a note about upcoming audits for all partner ministries for transparency and celebration of God's provision. The fourth, the HOA treasurer resigned, citing time in a brittle little speech. The fifth, the treasurer's husband stood up in the HOA meeting with a shaking hand and asked why his wife had been pressured to sign checks without a second signature. And Evelyn smiled the tight smile of a person reading an unexpected script and said the handbook allowed for the chair's discretion in limited circumstances, and 3 people whispered, and I learned how whispers sound when they finally find each other. Mark stopped messaging. Then he started again at odd hours. Mom is not sleeping. Did you do something at the church? The boutique got a visit from the state. I can't believe you. I can't believe her. He was falling between 2 magnets, pulled and repelled, and for the first time I didn't jump in to catch him. I was busy. My printer needed more ink. On the Tuesday of the book club, I showed up with a plate of brownies, which is how you enter a room full of women who have already decided whether you are an ally or a cautionary tale. The hostess blinked, surprised, and then gratitude crowded out her politics. A plate is a plate. I sat and listened to them talk about a memoir where a woman escapes a controlling husband and then spends a year learning to bake bread. Redemption, someone said. Carbs, said someone else. Evelyn arrived late, kissed everyone's cheek but mine, and called me sweetheart while never once turning her head enough to look me in the face. When the conversation moved to church gossip, and it always moved to church gossip, someone mentioned audits and how unfortunate it was to doubt such good work. Evelyn sighed prettily. Everything we do is above board, she said. We've just grown so fast. Growth is complicated, I offered. I noticed the state database still lists the boutique as a religious subsidiary with a revenue cap. If you've grown, it would be a blessing to update that and celebrate. She tilted her head. She did that when choosing a weapon. Some of us, she said, as if cooing, don't understand how these structures work. It's all right. I brought brownies, I said, and cut them into squares the size of little ledgers. Here is a thing I learned. When a woman like Evelyn is in control, the world looks seamless because she irons it daily. Once a wrinkle shows, there's a hunger to see the full crease. People who had talked about her as a saint now told me things like they were confessing minor sins. One of the book club women emailed me a forwarded message from Evelyn. Be sure to vote to approve the emergency funds for climate control in the boutique. I'll handle the contracting, sent before the meeting where the vote spontaneously occurred. The salon owner quietly asked if anyone had documentation for those raffle items because her accountant was nervous. The reporter wanted to meet for coffee. I said yes to the reporter and no to the reporter in the same breath because I wanted both outcomes, attention and deniability. We met in a crowded place. She was younger than I expected, with a backpack covered in enamel pins that clicked when she shifted. She kept saying, if this checks out, which I liked because it meant she worked in the world of verification and not just narrative. I gave her public documents, receipts, screenshots stripped of names. She nodded and said, softly, I've heard about her. 2 weeks later, a short piece ran in the community section. Questions raised about local charities' bookkeeping. It was careful and almost dull. It used words like allegedly and according to records. It did not mention Evelyn's name. Everyone knew anyway. I began sleeping again. It wasn't the sweet sleep of contentment. It was the exhausted sleep of someone who has been holding a heavy box at a weird angle and has finally set it down. I dreamt in calendars. I woke to Mark's calls and didn't always pick up. When I did, he said his mother had fallen on the stairs, that the stress was affecting her. I said I hoped she healed. He said I was being cruel. I said I was being accurate. He hung up on the word accurate like it had cut him. If the story had ended there, perhaps he would like me better. It didn't. Evelyn announced publicly that she would be honored at the Harvest Gala for service to the community, an event where donors wore leaves pinned to their lapels and took photos in front of a wall of paper vines. The boutique was under audit, the HOA was grumbling, the salon had started demanding payment at time of pickup only, but the gala was happening because of course it was. Control people believe in ceremony. Ceremony is where reality tries to make itself official. I bought a dress that fit like a thesis, smooth and undeniable. I called Juan. I called Mia. I called the book club hostess. I asked the reporter if she was free that night. I said please, and I said I'd be there, and we all said we didn't know what would happen, which was performance and truth. Here is what happened, the slideshow. There is always a slideshow. Photos of Evelyn smiling with donated coats, Evelyn hand on heart in front of a food drive, Evelyn at the thrift store holding a baby shoe like a relic. The AV volunteer was a kid from the youth group with a lanyard. He looked bored until he didn't. Slide 33 wasn't a photo. It was a screenshot, a check from the HOA to E. Hargreaves Consulting, /$2, $750, memo, admin services, endorsed in Evelyn's looping hand. The gasps were synchronized. Slide 34, the contractor's lien notice. Slide 35, sales receipts side by side, same SKU, different prices, volunteer discount on one that had never been authorized in the bylaws. Slide 36, a snippet from the state registry showing revenue caps. People don't know what to do with truth when it arrives wearing the wrong outfit. Some laughed in little barks. Someone stood up and said this was libel. Someone else asked how this got in the slideshow, and the AV kid held up his hands like he'd been handed a flash drive that didn't match the list of photos he'd been given, which he had. Evelyn's face did not move. It was a remarkable mask. She rose, took the microphone, and said, clear as a bell, there are misunderstandings about paperwork. Anyone who knows me knows my heart. I learned then that people who need to win do not fight you where the story lives. They fight you where the heart lives. She had always done that, made herself a matter of heart. The church board murmured. The pastor stepped up and prayed. The slideshow was canceled. The gala went on. That night, my inbox filled with messages from women who wrote, I'm sorry, and then told me nothing, and from men who wrote, I had no idea, and then asked for proof. I attached PDFs. I added the subject line receipts. I slept less well. The audit became formal. The boutique paused operations. The HOA hired an outside accountant. Evelyn's pearls, I am told, went back in the box. Mark came to my door and didn't know where to put his hands. You humiliated her, he said. I didn't put the check in the slideshow, I said, which was technically true and also not what he meant. He meant I had orchestrated a public unmasking. He meant I had turned her tactics on herself and found how well they fit my hands. He meant I scared him. Do you think she did nothing? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I could see all the stories fighting in him. The mother who packed him lunches, the woman who called him 5 times a day, the chair of committees, the signer of checks, the person who slept on a couch on the first floor, because of her back, the week the audit letter arrived, insisting she couldn't climb the stairs, a plaintiff in the court of public opinion with a limp. Our divorce finalized on a Tuesday in a room that smelled like old paper and new carpet. The judge asked in a tone of obvious boredom if reconciliation was possible. Mark said no. I said no. We signed. We left. Outside, a truck honked and a bird startled, and nobody clapped or booed. It was like completing a form and being assigned a number. Evelyn sent me a text that night that said, simply, God sees. I stared at it for a long time, and then I screenshot it and filed it with the others. I do not know why. Maybe because I wanted a complete set. There was one secret left, and it wasn't mine to tell, but by then I had started to believe, arrogantly, that I was the curator of the Truth Museum and could decide which exhibits went where. It arrived not as a document, but as a person, walking up my path in a coat that had once been expensive. Ruth, Evelyn's sister. I recognized her from photos, the one who moved away after a fight about money 20 years ago, the one nobody talked about. She sat on my couch and looked at her hands, which had the same knuckles as Evelyn's, the same story in another language. She did not start like this, Ruth said. She was always tidy. She liked to line things up. It became the only thing. When our mother died, she made a list of who got what spoon and then hid the good ones. She said it was for their safety. She told me about a child hers, whom she'd left with Evelyn for a summer while she recovered from surgery, a child who came back quieter, more precise, afraid to ask for seconds. Control is love, Ruth said, and her mouth bent around the words like they were an old injury that had healed wrong. I have not come to make you feel sorry. I have come to tell you are very good at this too. Be careful. She left me with a folder of her own, letters, old, where Evelyn wrote in a younger hand about debts paid with favors and favors earned with secrets. I did not put those in any slideshow. I read them and then put them in a box that said private and slid the box under my bed, where children hide their treasures and their nightmares. I made tea that tasted like cardboard and stared at the wall as if the wall would blink back. When the audit concluded, the church issued a statement that said errors were made in good faith and processes will be improved. The boutique reopened under new management. The HOA hired a firm. Evelyn resigned from everything with a letter full of flowers and thorns. She did not apologize. People brought casseroles to her house as if she were bereaved. They stood in her kitchen with the expensive island and spoke about forgiveness, which is the public ceremony we perform when we're tired. Forgiveness, in our town, is a casserole left on a counter. Sometimes I drive by her street at dusk. Mark's car is there less often now. Maybe he is learning to separate magnets. Maybe he isn't. It isn't my house anymore. It isn't my job to watch. But I still notice details, the way the porch light is always on, the way there's a new camera over the garage. If she listens at doors now, the doors are locked from the outside. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, that justice tasted like good tea instead of paper. The truth is messier. There's relief, yes, a room you can breathe in, but there's also a residue, a film on the tongue. When you live long enough in the economy of secrets, you begin to spend them like money. I stood at the edge of something and stepped forward, and I did not look down first. I learned I am capable of careful harm. I learned I can make a slideshow play and a room gasp, and a woman who has always been believed answer questions in public without a script. I learned that accuracy can be its own cruelty, and that precision can cut. People in town stopped me to say brave, or petty, or thank you, or how could you, and I said all the appropriate things. At night, I open the blue folder and the private box and reread everything I already know, as if repetition could wring meaning out of facts. God may see, as Evelyn's text promised, I see too, now, in a way I cannot unsee. I see the thin line between stewardship and theft, between boundary and isolation, between love and annexation. I see my reflection in glass doors and wonder whose ear is on the other side. The other day, I ran into Mia at the grocery store. She said they finally got reimbursed for the raffle dryer. She smiled without flinching. She looked at my cart and laughed about the brand of crackers we both buy when we don't want to think about dinner. It was so ordinary my eyes burned. Juan's cousin still works at the boutique. She says the new manager posts every donation online and thanks each donor by name. The reporter wrote a follow-up about governance and gently, studiously, did not call anyone a villain. The world did not end. It tilted a degree. I kept one thing, a souvenir, the cease and desist letter, folded in quarters, tucked into the back of my pantry behind the flour. Sometimes I take it out and feel the weight of the paper. It's heavier than you'd think. It carries the assertion of authority in its fibers. I like knowing where it is, hidden in a place that people raid when they want to bake something warm. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's fitting. Maybe I am learning a new model, not a mother's of grasping and guidance, not a martyr's of silent endurance, but a quieter ledger where the columns are truth, mercy, and the number of times I can choose not to send an email. Evelyn will say forever that she lost her son because I was ungrateful. I will say I lost a husband because she could not bear to be less than central. Both stories will circulate like weather, sometimes dry, sometimes humid, always present. Our town will build a new statue to a new saint next year and forget the old one had cracks under her paint. The boutique will sell another blouse that makes a woman like me feel like her body is an argument it finally won. New receipts will print, new checks will be signed, new chairs will run new committees and practice smiling when someone asks about line items. As for me, I am learning to live without the adrenaline of exposure. Silence feels dangerous, which is a sign I've been living wrong. I keep my folders because it would be dishonest to pretend I'm not the sort of woman who keeps folders. I keep them closed. I open the window in the mornings and let air in without listening at the frame. I buy flowers with cash. I answer when Mark calls, sometimes, and I wish him well, and I mean it in the way a person means good weather to someone in another town. You want a lesson at the end, because that's the contract of stories like this. Fine. Here it is. Revenge looks like a clean blade in movies. In real life, it looks like a spreadsheet. It looks like a printer that jams at the worst moment, and a pair of scissors, and a handful of envelopes addressed in your neatest, most respectful hand. It looks like a slideshow that shouldn't exist and a room that doesn't know whether to clap or pray. It looks like a woman who told you families stick together learning what sticks under pressure and what doesn't. It looks like you, standing in your kitchen, pressing a lawyer's letter flat under a magnet shaped like a strawberry, and saying aloud to nobody at all, "We are done," and "We are not done," and knowing both are true. She thought she got her baby boy back. Maybe she did, for a while. I got my noise. And then, slowly, I learned to make it quiet again.